Book club my foot, I found a hotel key. I roast coffee for a living, which means my nose knows more about my life than I do. It knew before I did when the cooling tray's metal held a whisper of gardenia that wasn't mine and wasn't my wife's usual citrus. It knew when my hoodie smelled faintly of a stranger's cologne after laundry day. And it knew, without a doubt, when my fingers brushed a plastic card deep in my wife's tote and felt the raised silver orchid and the numbers 1406. A hotel key, not a membership card, not a loyalty tag, a door. Book club, Lena said that evening, tucking hair behind one ear like she was shelving a thought. It might run late. New release, lots to discuss. I looked at her the way I look at a fresh roast, trying to hear the crack. Which book is it again? The one with the lighthouse on the cover. She pecked my cheek and smiled. You'd hate it. I didn't mention that her tote sounded heavier than a paperback. I didn't mention the key that had warmed my palm like a small, smug animal. If there's anything a roaster learns, it's patience. Heat, time, and airflow. Change one and the whole batch turns bitter. When the door closed, I parked on the kitchen stool and set the key on the counter. The numbers trapped light like they had a pulse. I typed Orchid Hotel into my phone and got the address 6 blocks from my roastery. I laughed out loud because the city isn't subtle. It prefers irony you can hold. I told myself 100 reasonable things. She plans events. She meets clients. She uses meeting rooms. Maybe this is nothing. Then I remembered that Lena doesn't read fiction about lighthouses. She reads cookbooks like love letters and interior design magazines like crime scenes. The roastery was warm at midnight, drums cooling like tired beasts. I switched off the last humming fan, pocketed the key, and walked to the Orchid. The lobby smelled like lemon oil and new money. The bar, a sunken oval of polished walnut, had the kind of light that forgives faces. I slid onto a stool and ordered still water because I needed my head sober enough to hear the truth when it finally introduced itself. Thursdays again, the bartender said, because the world enjoys its little rehearsed lines. Is that a busy night? I asked. For the regulars, he poured water like it cost secrets. You from out of town? Close enough, I said, and set the key on the bar. He clocked it without moving anything but his eyes. That's the old wing, he said. Good bones, old keys too. Room 1406, I said, and watched his face not change. Nice view, he said, of other people's windows. I stayed for 20 minutes and learned exactly nothing except that the bartender's name was Mateo and his ring finger wore a thin silver band. He'd seen everything a lobby could confess and knew the right price for silence and the right moment for a napkin. When a woman walked in laughing, wind-blown in a red coat, I looked at her hard enough to make my eyes ache. Not Lena. A different kind of trouble. On my walk home, I scraped the hotel card along the seam of my pocket and tried to file myself into a shape that wouldn't cut someone. My phone buzzed. Lena book club ran long. I picked up Chinese. You want the sesame noodles? I stared at the message until the dots of the ellipsis felt personal. Yes, I typed. Save me half. The reply hearted itself, and I decided not to taste the noodles for perfume. When you roast coffee, you start with green beans that look like unmade promises. You apply heat. They crack, first softly, then loud enough to sound like tiny bones learning they can be birds. If you pull too early, you get sour. Too late, and you scorch the sugar right out of them. The sweet spot is a guess you make with your whole body. I fell asleep in that guess. The next morning, while Lena showered, I lifted her tote and found the card again. I pressed it to my palm and felt my mouth decide something my head refused to accept. I needed to see the room before I saw the truth. The front desk clerk at the Orchid wore a tie that would look better if someone loved him. I slid the card across. I left my phone charger in 1406 last night. Could you? He glanced down, then at me, then at a screen. No current occupant on file, he said, apologetic without meaning it. But the key is still active. It does that, I said, as if we had an understanding. The hallway outside 1406 smelled like hotel. Overwashed carpet, hopeful disinfectant. I pressed the card. The light went green, a color that can mean go or envy. The door opened on cool air and a suite that believed in itself. Someone had staged a life in tasteful beige. Low sofa, neat bar cart, bed tucked with corners like ambition. A single champagne flute sat lonely on the counter, lipstick ghosting the rim the way a mouth leaves its echo after a kiss. I walked the room like I was casing myself. The view was exactly as promised, other windows confessing to nothing. On the nightstand, the housekeeping card read in looping handwriting, "Enjoy your Thursday." I folded it once, twice, slid it into my pocket with the key, and understood the choreography. If I confronted Lena in the kitchen on a Tuesday, she would give me truths carved down to diet size. If I met her on stage, where desire rehearses itself, the dialogue might stop pretending. I booked the room for the following Thursday. I didn't do it with rage. I did it with tape and lists like I was planning an opening. I texted Lena Wednesday afternoon, no roasting late tomorrow. Surprise date at 8. Wear the gold dress. The one that makes strangers fall in love with you. She replied with a flame emoji, and my chest answered with a fire alarm. On Thursday, I left the roastery early and went home. I put on a suit that knew what it was doing. In my pocket, the note from the nightstand, the hotel key, and the old Polaroid of us at 24, wild with our first apartment and window light. I grabbed a silk robe on my way, champagne-colored, soft as a lie you want to believe. I didn't buy it to trap her. I bought it because even if the night ended like a closing, I wanted to tell her I remembered softness. I got to the Orchid at 7:30. Mateo raised 2 fingers in both greeting and question. I lifted the key. He gave me that little nod people use when they've decided who you are. Outside 1406, the door felt like a forehead I wanted to press mine against. Inside, I set the robe on the bed, the note beside it. Enjoy your Thursday. I stood in the bathroom mirror and rehearsed a face that didn't look like a verdict. At 8:03, the door clicked and Lena stepped in wearing the gold dress. I know fabric. I know how bias-cut silk turns a living body into a stream you're thirsty for. She set her tote down like she'd done it before. My heart made a sound I didn't know hearts could make. "Hello," she called softly, and then said it again, the second time warmer. "Trent." The name landed like a coin in water. I had guessed at names. It still made me flinch. She saw the robe, the note. Her smile had too many muscles in it, a performance for a small paid audience. She touched the silk with her fingertips, the way she touches frosting to see if it's set. She texted someone, "Here." Then she took a breath that opened the zipper along her spine just a little, the way relief reaches for skin. I stepped from the bathroom into the doorway. She froze. All that necessary blood in her face went on lunch break. She looked at me the way you look at the sea just before it decides what kind of night you're having. "Julian," she said, and the syllables were clean, no fake surprise. She is not a woman who wastes theater on a man who knows where her birthmark is. "I like the dress," I said, because it's what I would have said if we'd been on a normal date in a normal life. She looked at the robe, the note, my hands. Her jaw worked through 3 replies and chose none. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to learn the bartender's name," I said. "Long enough to book the room before somebody else did." Silence stretched, then softened. The room made more space. She sat on the edge of the bed and put her palms on her knees like she was about to apologize to a priest. "I didn't want it to be this," she said. I nodded. I didn't want my kitchen to smell like someone else's hotel either. She laughed, a sad little sound that still owned its good bones. He's easy. He looks at every chair I choose like I invented sitting. "I remember that look," I said. "You gave it to me the first time I dialed the roaster by ear and hit the curve on instinct." "You were magic," she said too quickly. "You are." "I am a man who found a key," I said, and then I sat beside her, close enough to remember the heat I'd been missing. I could have lectured. Instead, I placed the old Polaroid on her thigh. We stared at our younger mouths pressed together in our empty apartment back when we ate noodles on the floor and the air felt expensive. We looked invincible. We looked like idiots. We looked like oxygen. "Talk to me," I said. "No scripts. No alibis. Tell me the story the way you'd tell me if we were two strangers in a bar and this night wasn't going to haunt you." She did. It came out simple and human. A client who became a friend who became a hand at her waist when she laughed too hard at something ordinary. Lunches that were technically meetings. A kiss outside a rideshare after wine and compliments. Then once a room. Then less than once but more than never. She said it like a confession without adjectives. I didn't need detail. I needed the line you draw so you can decide what side of it you stand on. "Do you love him?" I asked. "No," she said. "I love the way he makes me feel in the middle of a workday, like the lights flip on." She looked at me and the room got honest. "You used to do that. I think we forgot to plug each other in." I could have said. I didn't forget. I could have said. "I asked you to come by the roastery and you said smoke gave you headaches." Instead, I did a thing you might call sentimental or strategic. I opened my phone and played the song we married to, the slow one nobody admits they like. I stood and offered her my hand. She took it on a delay, like her palm had to catch up to her mouth. We danced, which in a hotel suite means swaying in a small orbit and remembering that bodies are bilingual. My hands traveled only where promises live, the dip above her hip, the column of her neck, the small of her back. I kissed her like daytime television, suggestive enough to cause letters but not fines. When our mouths parted, we probably looked like a movie still. I didn't push it. The point wasn't punishment or porn. It was proof of heat, of history, of the story we still could tell when we used our mouths for honesty. "I have 2 envelopes," I said, because nothing sounds sexier in a hotel gown than paperwork. I pulled them from my inside pocket, one labeled repair, one release. She traced the words with a finger. "What's in repair?" "My conditions if we try. Full transparency, couples therapy with someone who isn't named Trent, a phone call to him on speaker ending it tonight. No more hotel keys that don't belong to us and Thursdays are ours. All of them. No book club unless we're reading the wine list." And release. Separation with dignity. No mutual friends dragged into court. You keep the apartment until the lease ends. I keep the roastery. We split the vinyl. We don't scorch the earth. The silence after that felt like a test and a lullaby. She stared at release long enough for me to feel the floor list to one side. Then she picked up repair and opened it. "Speaker," she said, and lifted her phone. She dialed. He answered with a charm he wore like cologne. "Hey, you, elevators are slow tonight, I'm almost." "This is Lena," she said, "and Julian is with me." A beat, then a scoff that tried to be a laugh. "Well, hi, Julian." "We're ending this," she said steady. "I'm choosing my marriage." He turned snide on cue. "You choosing him because he caught you, baby. That's not choosing, that's negotiating. I'm choosing myself, she said, and the part that doesn't lie to the only person who learned my favorite side of the bed. He muttered something about mistakes in chemistry and the way lighthouses work. I hit end. Lena placed the phone on the nightstand like it was hot. She slid the ring off and set it beside the phone. Not a threat, an offer. I can earn this back or I can pack my things, but I'm not going to hold it hostage. I watched her. The robe lay on the bed, champagne bright, a softness auditioning for a part it hadn't read. Put it on, I said. She did slow, the silk catching light like a secret finally given a window. A belt tied, a shoulder bare just enough to be evening, not midnight. I kissed the bone where neck becomes shoulder and let that be the line we wouldn't cross tonight. We can keep PG-13 and still set the room on a considerate fire. Thursdays are ours, I said against her skin. Every one, she said. We didn't sleep there. I checked us out. Mateo looked up when we passed, clocked the robe sash and the way our shoulders touched, and smiled like a man who enjoys happy endings but doesn't expect them. We walked home the long way, past the corner where we once fought about shelves and made up 5 minutes later because the rain decided we should. At the apartment, we deconstructed the altar. She opened drawers and pulled out anything that had lived, even briefly, in the shadow of Trent. The pen he lent, the receipt from the wine bar where the waitress wrote a heart. We fed them to the kitchen trash with ceremony, and a splash of dish soap like holy water. I brewed coffee at midnight, a honey-processed lot that tastes like orange blossom if you let it. Lena leaned on the counter in the robe and watched me move. "Plug me in," she said, and I smiled because there it was, the sentence the night had been hunting. We're not naive. Coffee burns if you stop watching it. Love does too. We went to therapy, not the kind with crystals, the kind with a chair that has seen inconvenience. We said the word hurt out loud enough times for it to get bored and sit down. Trent tried twice more, once with a nostalgic emoji, once with an apology that wore a suit and no tie. Lena blocked him. On a later Thursday, the bartender passed me a folded napkin from a woman who said she liked my hands. I put it in my pocket, then later in the trash, then told Lena anyway because that's what repair costs, receipts and the courage to show them. Some nights we still dress up. I pull the gold dress from its hanger. She ties my tie the way you tie a bow on a gift you plan to keep. We go out and flirt with each other like we're reckless and new. When the elevator opens and the lobby smells like lemon oil and other people's stories, we hold hands and choose a different door. And on Thursdays, without fail, I close the roastery early. We cook something with too much garlic. We put on the slow song. We let hands be bilingual again and keep the fade to black where YouTube would approve. The robe hangs on a hook by the bedroom window, soft and neutral and not guilty anymore. When the city asks what we're doing in there, the curtains answer for us. People ask how I knew to trust her again. I don't. I know how to calibrate heat, how to watch for the first crack, how to smell when sugar is about to turn mean. I know how to say not yet when part of me wants now and how to say now when waiting looks like fear. I know this. The envelope labeled repair still sits in our drawer, coffee stained and real. Every Thursday we sign it again without pens. Every morning she texts me a photo of our bed unmade with the caption, "Reading list us." And the key, I keep it in the cabinet with the tasting spoons. A reminder that doors open both ways, out of a mess, back into a home.